frankly, it is astounding to me that it's already late 2024. The year has just flown by so fast. We're at the time of year, the leaves are starting to change. It's getting colder out, unless you live in California where it's still over 90 for some reason. But October is the beginning of the holiday season, I feel like. By the time October rolls around, you even go into a Costco and there's rows upon rows of plastic Christmas trees, inflatable Christmas decorations, and the holiday season is really starting to kick off. And something people do a lot during the holiday season is buy things. And I recently made a video about how to pick the right PC handheld, and I figured, well, it might be time to update my emulation handhelds list, and I figured, why not? So let's just jump right into this in the first section, which I would describe as the ultra low budget, cheap range of handhelds. Think of like 50 and below. And there are quite a few decent options, especially from Anbernic. Anbernic has a whack ton of devices for all screen sizes and form factors. My personal favorites are the Anbernic RG35XX and the 35XXH. Those both devices are on sale currently for less than $50, putting them only a couple bucks more expensive than the previous cheap device I recommended, the Anbernic RG28XX, which is just a very small handheld. While these other devices I mentioned, the 35XX line devices, are still quite small, they're also very powerful, capable of all the way up to N64 emulation, and with a plethora of custom firmwares out there that can increase performance, you can really decide whatever you want from this device. You can have it be a dedicated 2D machine if you get the DMG styled one, or if you want to play more 3D titles, PSP, PS1, and 64, you can do that with the H model. Install some custom firmware and you're off to the races. One last device I like is the Miu Mini, but that device is really hard to get your hands on. While it's also pretty much exactly the same as other devices like the Anbernic RG35XX, but those are just more available at this point. This next section is like $150 to $100 price range. When you're in this price range, you're looking for probably some of the best value handhelds. And some of the best ones I've seen have recently gone on sale. The original Retroid Pocket 4 is on sale for $135. And honestly, that is an amazing price. But on the cheaper side, at $89, below the budget for this section, but still higher than the previous section, is the Retroid Pocket 2S. That device is capable all the way up to very light GameCube and PS2 emulation, while the full-size Retroid Pocket 4 is more than capable of PS2 and GameCube emulation. Both those devices offer a decent value, and it's really up to you what you want to focus on. Do you want to focus in more on having a wider screen to play widescreen GameCube and PS2 games that are available? Or do you want to focus in more on a 4:3 aspect ratio with a smaller and more compact and portable form factor? It's really up to you whether you want to go one way or the other. For me personally, I think the Retroid Pocket 4 offers a decent enough value where you should probably go down that route instead. It has some room to you to grow. Unfortunately, it does have a 16:9 screen, leaving you with pillar boxing on the sides of the screen if you're playing 4:3 titles, but I think that is a worthy compromise for the extra power that you're getting for you to grow long-term with this device. This next section is going to be around $150 to $250. It's a bit more higher end, you're taking your emulation more seriously and you want a little bit more of a premium experience, or you're simply seeking more power to achieve higher end emulation. And there are quite a few devices that do fit that bill, some pretty recent releases too, like the Retroid Pocket 5 and Mini. Hi, Editing Jacob here. I forgot to preface that I know the Retroid Pocket 5 isn't out yet. I should have said it will be an amazing device. I just thought I should clarify that because I don't actually have that device on hand yet. Sorry, now back to the video. Those devices range from $220 to $200 respectively, and honestly, it's a pretty compelling value, though I do feel like the Mini is a little overpriced for what it is. $200 is kind of a stiff price, especially when you're buying a miniature device. It's more pocketable, but it also has a Snapdragon 865 in it, capable of some pretty decent emulation all the way up into the Nintendo Switch era of devices. On top of that, both those devices have OLED displays, having a remarkable improvement for color saturation, overall vibrancy, in just having those inky, beautiful blacks. It's shaping up to be, quite frankly, one of the best devices of the entire year. But I'm not a huge fan of the redesign. Retroid had an iconic, classic retro aesthetic, and with this recent redesign, it straight up just looks like they copied Anbernic and Ioneo and just sort of mashed together their worst ideas into this device. While it doesn't look terrible, but the Mini just looks awkward. I don't think the fact that it's 0 bezels changes the fact that the screen looks weirdly small inside the device. Personally though, between the two, I really like the Retroid Pocket 5. Though it shares similar design aspects as the Mini, it looks way more finished, and it doesn't look weird to me at all for some reason. Though it comes at the more expensive $220 price point, I think that's a decent value for the level of performance you are getting. Before in this price point, you would only get light Nintendo Switch emulation, nothing high-end, mostly indie titles or easier to run games. But with a Snapdragon 865 chipset, you should be capable of emulating pretty much a decent amount of the Switch library. I'm not talking like Pokemon Legends of Arceus, but you should be able to run like Mario Wonder. But with Nintendo shutting down Ryujinx, I'm not entirely sure how people are going to go forward with emulation for the Switch on Android. Anbernic has some pretty decent offerings at this price point. The Anbernic RG556 at $172 right now, and the recent release of the Anbernic 406V, a DMG-style version of the 556. You can get that for $164. These devices are pretty cool. They both have OLED screens, which is also really nice, and overall, they're just very ergonomic, very comfortable, very big devices. And of course, all these devices mentioned in this section have been on Android, which to me is the best operating system for emulation purposes. Those two devices from Anbernic do offer a pretty decent value. They both run the T618 chipset, which is pretty powerful, capable of near perfect GameCube and PS2 emulation, and light to mid-range Nintendo Switch emulation. Though not consistent enough for me to recommend it for those purposes, it is still a pretty decent device. I have criticized the 556 before in the past for just sitting in the middle, being not enough for high-end emulation, but too much for reasons like getting it for just Game Boy Advance emulation, being too expensive for those purposes. So it felt kind of weird in terms of market position. But now I realize it's a pretty convenient device, especially if you wanted a landscape form factor with an OLED screen, which at the time, the Pocket 5 wasn't out when this first came out. It was the only landscape OLED handheld that offered this level of performance. So for some people, this was the perfect device. The last device I'm going to be talking about is a recent release, the Ioneo Pocket Micro. I love the way this device looks, but it utterly befuddles me for the sense of that this device is almost $220, and for early bird pricing, it is $189, and it only offers a Helio G99 processor. This device is amazing. It's pretty good for Game Boy Advance, your 16 and 8-bit games, but it has 2 analog sticks, and not being powerful enough to handle 100% of N64 and not 100% of PS1 games kind of confuses me. This device is amazing, but just not worth $200. We'll get into this more in the next section because Ioneo makes amazing devices, but just is terrible with their pricing. Aside from that, the best values here are really the Anbernic devices, but just my overall pick for this section to really get the most out of your money, I really do feel like the Retroid Pocket 5 offers a compelling value because of that amazing OLED screen and an even higher end chipset than what the 556 or the 406V can offer. So for $220, my choice is the Retroid Pocket 5. This next section is going to be the high end. You're spending a lot of money and you expect a good device. And there are quite a few devices to parse through because there is just a huge amount of competition in this space. And every other week it feels like there's a new announcement for this section. So let's just jump right into it with one of the devices out there right now, the Odin 2. I love the Odin 2. You can get it for about $300 on sale right now, which seems to be perpetual. I've never seen it higher than $300 anyways. It's weird. This device has a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, and it's an incredibly powerful chipset capable of the highest in emulation we've seen so far. And I've constantly sung the praises of this device as being one of my favorite and just considered one of the best values in gaming right now. But some other competitors of this device have been either announced or released. The one that has been announced is the iNeo Pocket Evo with the Snapdragon G3X2 chipset. We saw this chipset found in the iNeo Pocket S, and I've talked about how much I despise it, because that device is at least $400 and at best matches the performance of the Odin 2. And it's just due to a sheer lack of driver support. These emulators aren't necessarily optimizing for that chipset. They usually optimize for the more standard, the most popular Snapdragon chipsets, which is usually their 8 series of chips, whether it's their 8 Plus Gen 2, their 888, the 865 found in the Pocket 5. It is realistically the most popular line of processors, and it's the easiest to optimize for. This G3X chip is more customized, it is more graphically powerful, but doesn't get all that used up really in terms of emulation. And this Evo device is set to be, at early bird pricing, $389, and to buy when it's fully out at $500. It is utterly ridiculous. Another device iNeo is making is the iNeo Pocket DMG, set to have the same G3X chipset in a DMG style layout, missing one analog stick. It only has the one, and it utterly confuses me why this thing exists, because it's too powerful what it's being designed for. At least the 406V had the sense to add the second analog stick because it had this higher end chipset capable of N64, PS2, and GameCube level emulation, so you can more comfortably play those games. This DMG device completely lacks the second analog stick, making playing any 3D tiles just really annoying. And for over $450 when it fully releases, it just doesn't make any sense. Another device in this section technically fits is the Steam Deck. While I don't necessarily think this is the best choice for emulation, it still definitely deserves to be mentioned. With EmuDex being able to set that up on your Steam Deck, it would be an amazing experience. And on top of that, it can play PC games. So for people who need the most, and I mean the most amount of versatility, the Steam Deck just makes the most obvious choice if you're in this price range. Keep in mind though, the Steam Deck will probably have the worst battery life out of all of these devices. People behind the Odin also have the Odin 2 Mini with a mini LED display, and that is an amazing device. Though I haven't seen it much in person, it is an amazing device that should offer the same level of performance as the Odin 2, but you're gonna have to pay an extra $40 for that privilege. So if you want one of the best screens out there, you're gonna have to cough up a few extra bucks. My pick for the high-end device section, I would have to go with the Odin 2, because the other devices out there aren't either released or are releasing, but they're just way too expensive to justify. My overall pick though, if you've watched to the end of the video, is going to be the Retroid Pocket 5. That device, to me, meets a certain niche of people who want to maximize their budget as much as they possibly can, while also still saving as much as they possibly can, trying to utilize their money to the fullest, and I genuinely believe the Retroid Pocket 5 is going to fit that perfectly. I would love to hear what you guys think though. Are you interested in any of the devices I mentioned? There are a few others that I chose not to talk about because the Pocket S from Ambernick and the other one just are completely ridiculous, but I would love to hear what you guys think. Did this list help you pick what your device you should get? I would love to hear about this in the comments down below, and if I forgot any devices too, link them down below so I can check them out. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. all the other garbage down below. And last but not least, don't forget to have a wonderful day.